to use bones to articulate this robot arm. I've got a little scene here. Remember that all of your scenes should show something, so we're going to have something come along the conveyor. The robot arm needs to pick it up and then attach it to this little jet engine thing that's on the floor, and that's going to be your task. What I'll do is I'll show you how to articulate this arm using bones. The first thing you'll probably notice is that there's a number of different materials on this robot arm. The reason for that being is that rather than extrude the arm out of a single piece, what I've done is I've constructed it from a number of different objects. And if you do this, when you build the bones, what happens is the meshes don't stretch. So it's going to be much easier for me to rotate this green piece at 90 degrees to the red piece without any deformation of this joint in here. So let's get started. I'll just remove all of the other things in the scene. You'll notice that I've got plenty of layers in here, but the only layer that I'm really interested in is my robot arm. And I'll just change it to materials so I can see what I'm doing. So my preferred method of working is where it's in X-ray mode, so we can see through the objects, and I'll just centralise that. So to add the bones, straightforward enough. Add a single bone, go find it somewhere, there it is, and move it into the approximate location that we're interested in. I seem to have got proportional editing on, so I'm just going to turn that off. There we go. So scale that in the Z, and you'll notice that I've put the centre of the bottom of the bone along the centre line of this rotation point so that I can rotate the tip of the bone around that point. Once I've got the first bone in place, hit tab to go into edit. It's selected the tip of the bone, E to extrude, and then I can extrude another bone along a different axis. Okay, so just continue to do that, line up those bones where needed. Extrude my bone down. I can lock it in the axis by hitting Z or X, so extrude my bone across, extrude my bone down, that one, extrude it again, and basically work my way down. So keep extruding the bones. Okay, and we can put the final bone outside of this because we're going to parent the mesh to the bone, but we want something to catch a hold of and be able to rotate when we're posing it. So there we go, I've created a fairly simple set of bones for my armature, and if we just look at that in the front view, sadly it's nowhere near my armature, so I'll just come out of edit mode, move the whole thing where I'm interested. There we go, from the top, looks alright. And now I've got all my bones in the right place. The next thing I need to do is I need to parent the individual meshes with the correct bones. So for this we're going to pose mode, so select your armature, go into pose mode and select the bone that we're interested in. So I'm going to select the object first, just to think about it there, hit shift and select the bone as well, and in this case I'm going to select 2 bones to parent with this object, then hit Control and P and you'll get a set parent menu. And we're not going to do any of these armature deform or anything like that, we're just going to do bone. That's now parented, so the object's parented to there, and you'll see that there's a thin line leading back to the root of the bone. That's the kinematics, so it's forward kinematics on this. we'll be able to move the bones and the rotation will move forward in the chain. If you can't remember that, go back and look at the videos on forward and reverse kinematics. Do the same thing again, so take the next section and we're going to parent that to this bone. So Control P, bone, and we're going to parent this one to this bone, Control P, Control P, bone, this one to this one, Control P, bone, so this one and this one, Control P, bone, this one to this one, Control P, bone. So now I'm in a position that I can start to pose the armature and affect the way that the robot arm is going to look. So if I select the bottom bone here and go into the right view, by moving that we can now see that it will pose the mesh itself and put it in the correct location. Now remember that when we're doing an animation, it's go to the frame, make the change, add the keyframe, and that way that you'll get the correct sequence of things that you're expecting. Just one more thing to show you is sometimes it's useful to constrain some of the bones in how much movement they've got. So if we select this parent bone and go to bone constraints and add a constraint to there, we can actually limit the rotation on that bone, and we can limit it in the X. You'll see that it's already moved. We limit the X to a minimum of 45 and a maximum of, let's say, 135, which might seem like a strange figure, but if we start adding things together you'll see that there's a fixed distance between those, and we limit it in the Y and limit it in the Z. When we rotate this bone now, what happens is it will only rotate in a specific plane. It'll only rotate along there. Notice that it's also stretching that, so I could add a constraint to stop things being stretched as well, because clearly a robot arm doesn't stretch like that. So that's a useful thing to understand. However, do be careful using this, because this constraint, because it's on the root bone, means that all of these other bones can't actually have that constraint applied. So even though this constraint is applied here, you'll see that we can still move these other bones further. So your job today is to articulate or create your own bones for your robot arm, and then articulate your robot arm to give it some realistic movement such that, just remove that, such that it picks something up from the conveyor and places it onto the jet engine. Relatively straightforward. You've got about an hour and a half to do that, and then I'll get you to upload it and demonstrate it. Thanks.